Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. And today, my G joins me to talk about, and I say that as a almost a bit of a jest for the intro, but today's topic is certainly something that is pretty hard hitting. Some of you will know bits about Matt's journey of essentially pollution poisoning because we've put bits on Instagram and I've mentioned it before. However, in reality, it was very much, and we label it a Netflix episode or series, should I say, because when something happens to you that is life altering, in the midst of it, you're pretty much surviving, which is what we could quantify as what it felt like for you, and particularly, for me, supporting you and not really knowing what to do at times because it was an unknown time. And now coming through it, being back in the UK and reflecting a lot, we certainly feel like it's a time where we can do an episode to talk about it. And, yes, this is a bodybuilding podcast, but you guys will know if you listen regularly, goes beyond that. The name of the podcast is Beyond Condition for a reason, because that spans into a whole realm of things, including mental health. And Matt's story that we're going to talk about, and next week we have Jose on talking about things of a different nature, but essentially life-changing things that are traumatic that we can come through. You can take parts of this episode into things that you might face. And it's important when you listen to an episode of this nature that it's never a case of, and you'll know this from my own personal story and when I do episodes, it's never a case of, oh, well, someone's been through worse than me. Someone is harder off than me. So I should be fine. I should be fine. I should be able to deal with anything. It doesn't matter what you're going through, the quantifiable in your mind is how severe that feels for you. And that's why it's important to draw strength from other people, because when you listen to a story of this nature, you can easily think, well, that's far worse than things that I've been through. And I'm sure you'll agree, Matt. But actually, bringing it back to where you're at, it's about taking tools, it's about resonating in different ways. So, when Matt talks about the struggles mentally that he went through, is there things that you can resonate with and go, okay, so something similar is happening to me? What could I actually do to draw strength from that example? And that's often missed. And Matt and I actually had a conversation this morning about stages of grief. So this is something I see and I talk to my clients about, and this is something I see in people I know, that when you go through something that is huge for you, that you can experience stages of grief off the back of that. If it's something traumatic, if it's something you're dealing with that alters your life, you can almost go through these stages of grief. And it's something I said to Matt that I think could be potentially overlooked at times, where it's like you go through a breakup, or in our instance, you move country, or you have a health scare. Something big happens in your life, and grieving that, whether that's a past you or a new scenario, grieving that and giving yourself time, I believe, can give you steps forward to being able to reincarnate yourself, rebuild your life, and actually give respect to how you feel. And I said to Matt, when something happens of the nature of what happened to him and us, it's like, what's wrong with going, that is so fucking shit that has happened to me. I don't deserve that. I feel pretty sorry for myself right now, And I say it with a nervous laugh because we're often told, oh, stop feeling sorry for yourself. You've got to get over it. Da 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 da. But if someone was to die that that you're very close to, I don't feel like people around you would go, oh, fucking get over it. You need to move on. No, they would give you respect. They would tell you to respect how you feel. So why is that different when your life changes in a huge way to actually take some fucking time to process it, to reflect, to learn what you want your life to look like moving forward, to be able to go, okay, so this happened to me. Those things that happened to me, they're not going to go away. So are they going to potentially come back in a different form? Am I still going to have trauma from that? Absolutely. There's times where I slip into, and I recently did an episode about this in January. I can find myself going back into a victim mentality because I was there for fucking over 30 years, right? That's what I knew. Does that mean I'm a weak person? Does that mean that I'm a traumatized person? No, it means that I'm a fucking human. All my fuckings are coming out. But it's something that I feel very passionate about because there's a difference between, you know, just feeling sorry for yourself for the sake of it, or there being something of substance that requires respect. And that's what I think is so important. So I've rambled on enough to intro this episode before I, of course, thank Matt for his time today.
Hello.
So, of course, we do live together, so we're on the camera together. And I guess a good place to start would be what our dream was from essentially before the pollution poisoning happened of actually going to Thailand. Like, what were our aspirations? Why did we want to, pursue this adventure of a perceived lifetime, why did we want to move to Thailand? Maybe you could say it in your words because you were the instigator per se, and then I just went, oh fuck it.
Yeah, so there's a drastic difference between the Western world and life in Asia in the sense of here, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of differences, obviously, from a cultural perspective, but in terms of the stress that is precipitated palpably amongst everybody, it's the rat race, right? It's wake up to an alarm, I crack on, I work extensive hours. Obviously, things in the UK consistently get more and more expensive. And there's like, especially in certain times of the year where it's darker, there's a general kind of cloud over the whole place, for want of a better kind of phrase, I guess. And in Asia, in my experience previously, having lived there for relatively shorter periods of time in both Bali and Thailand, is the people are very different and the environment and the energy is very different. And obviously, the weather makes a big difference. And it's just a complete culture remap. It's a little bit like the Wild Wild West when you're riding around and there aren't any necessarily stringent policings of the road, apart from if you don't have a driving license and you have to pay like £5 fine, and then you can drive on for a few days. And it's really to experience that and a different way of living, different places to live, different environments to put yourself in. You can go and live in the mountains and live in the city in a few different hours, travel around and see lots of different people, meet different people, train in different places, just have a complete different experience as opposed to going on holiday in Europe or going and living in Europe, in which case you can find yourself in different towns and cities in Europe and think, well, this could be somewhere in the UK or it could be somewhere, fairly close to home. So that was the expectation. And obviously, you get more for your money. Or I like the analogy that I spoke to someone who lived out there. It's like if you spend 100 grand out there, you'll get a ridiculous return on your money. If you spend £100 out there, you'll get a ridiculous return on your money. Spend £5 out there, you'll get a ridiculous return on your money. So it's kind of exponential in terms of how much you want to spend, you'll get a big return on what you have and what you experience. So I'd say that was kind of the expectation, and experiencing that was what was kind of set out.
Yeah, as our destiny, as it were. So we were planning to actually live there, and also as a bit of a extension of what you said there is that when we decided to move, previous to that, for a good few months, and it's something I spoke to Dee about the other day with the rising costs, because you've mentioned that in the UK, that Matt started to get like low level stress that started to increase over months, where you felt pissed off basically about how much we have to pay to live in the UK. And I believe that was coupled with your experiences that you've just outlined of not having that in other countries. So the facilitation to that being a dream, right? To work and be able to enjoy your money more and not have to pay out so much in the UK, particularly in the winter when the bills go up, etc. And before we left, it was when all of the bills were going up, wasn't it? And it seemed like it was this never-ending mountain of increase in cost to live.
Yeah, I resent the amount you have to pay to live in the UK because you don't, it will go up for insert excuse or reason. Excuse or reason disappears and the price still remains high. So you've got the war that went on, so therefore they've got to increase the price of all of the fuel that you use, etc. That dies down, stays up. And essentially you get caught exactly in that kind of rat race, right? And it's on you to a certain degree to not then, when you earn more money, spend more money and therefore just live at your means, or you should be living below your means ultimately. But then that is exacerbated, and people will feel that if you're working, a regular job with a regular income, all of a sudden you're expected to pay £200 more a month, £300 more a month, £400 more a month. Tough, you just got to find it. You don't get paid that much more in terms of doing it, and you're not getting anything more off the back of it. And yet there are other countries, there are other places, and this is the perception of places in Asia is that it's poor, it's poverty ridden, da, 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 all of that stuff. People are there really happy. Everyone's pretty happy with what they're doing. They seemingly, on our face of it, have nothing in comparison to riding around in a 70 grand car. Someone's got a £300 bike that's just barely held together. They're riding around with a smile on their face. The person driving the 70 grand Mercedes is
Looking for the next car.
miserable as fuck. But putting on Instagram, I've got a 70 grand car. Yeah. And this was a point I had many years ago when I perceived this guy was like rolling around in this like nice new Jag. And then months later, it got repossessed. And it was on the face of it, he owned that car, but he didn't. Then he got into debt and then he lost it. And that's a, tangent to go off on. But there's this whole just general demeanor in the UK
Mm.
of that. And it's not something that I particularly enjoy. And back in my day of like, getting into more of the coaching side of stuff, you definitely can get caught up in spending more money, da, 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 doing all of that. But that wasn't the case. This time it was just, I just resented that and the offer of more for your money. And therefore, and this was where I've kind of changed my scope in terms of like work, 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 work all the time. And my mental, when I was busy working every single hour, so from like 4 in the morning till like 12 or 1 in the morning, no exaggeration, my mantle was Matt doesn't need sleep. Matt doesn't need sleep. Matt can just run on 3 or 4 hours and he just works all the time. And it was this like mantle of honor. And over years, I've kind of shed that to the point where I actually want to live my life, want to enjoy my life. Yes, I want to work. Yes, I want to deliver what I do to my clients. I don't feel the necessity to have 100 clients. I don't feel the necessity to work from 12 till 4 in the morning or even from 6 in the morning till 10 at night. And being able to get more and then spend more of that free time that then comes back to do what I like to do, which is actually like learn stuff, educate stuff, which came in clutch for the pollution side of stuff because I now have a PhD in pollution.
That'll make Beth laugh.
Yeah, so Matt PhD, also air filtration system. If you want any specialist advice on that, DM me. So I got and I can sort of get caught up in these kind of things because the way my mind works, it accelerates and moves very quickly through thought processes. It was resentful. And now it's like, still don't enjoy paying for the things that we have to pay for. But the air doesn't kill me here. So that's like, that's not too bad. Like being alive's okay for paying a bit more money.
Some renewed perspective as well, and this is definitely something to fast forward, and then we obviously will go back. But it's like when we actually came back to the UK, I wasn't necessarily. It didn't bother me. I don't know. I'm not. We're from different backgrounds, aren't we? So I never. I just paid the bills, as it were. I had a mortgage. You've never had a mortgage before, have you? So
Neither shall I.
no, and I had a mortgage. I was used to pretty much living in a box of saving X amount per month, paying my bills, and that was it, and it was just bodybuilding that I did, and I was in a marriage, but on my own. So I just that's how I always lived, and I don't generate, hate towards those things and resent towards those things. Whereas I wanted to, one, fuck it and try this because I've never been to Asia. Was I reserved? To a certain degree, yes, because my first thought was, can I get normal protein, normal vegetables, and a gym? And again, it was part of changing my narrative and fast forwarding, like I say, to when we came back, it was a renewed perspective of how grateful we are for life, and consequently, being in the UK, what can that offer rather than what is it taking? And this is something that I've spoken about recently on the pod, where it's like, what's bodybuilding taking from you and what are you getting from it? Where does that scale go? And is bodybuilding the right route for you? It relates heavily to what we're saying there. It's like we've come back. You haven't been stressed about the bills. Sometimes you're like, oh, fucking council tax or whatever in jest, but you're not the bound up stressed person about it that you used to be before we left. This again is something that can come from processing, reflecting, and healing and grieving, that you get a renewed perspective if you allow yourself that time to do that. And like you said, we're grateful for life. So whatever that needs to look like from a financial standpoint. And what I will confirm is that, and I've spoken about this previously, I've never had the urge to have hundreds of clients. How much time I spend with each of my clients, it's impossible to have hundreds of clients, and I do not want to do that personally. And each coach has their own way of doing that, but my coaching is very different. There's a lot of mindset work, there's time that goes into each and every client, and I do have that obsessive nature where I've got data accruing back for years on every client, because that's how I like to do things, and it would zap the joy out of it if it was a rat race, from a coaching standpoint for me personally. I like to, really know what's happening with each client, and deliver that. Again, we all have different ways of doing that. We all have different personalities and we all have different drivers. My drive is not money, as you know.
It's definitely not.
Matt will often, when I say take the piss, but
Yeah,
in jest that, how much I will try and help people off my own back for no financial return. And that in itself for me was a driver to go, okay, so if Thailand offers that, I can continue to offer that quality and then have that potential to be able to not need the money that we need in the UK, as it were, and free up some time. And that's in summary what our dream was to do and fulfill that. And when we first got there, I mean, it was absolute adventure, it was great. We got there, we, settled in, we chose a few different places we lived, like we rented different places, hotels, houses, and this was all unbeknown to us out of the pollution season, as it were. So we spent Christmas there. We had January, February, your birthday, and then it started to get towards sort of end of February, March, and it's still nice and hot. We'd started to hear sort of whispers, hadn't we, of, because we started to meet some English people out there, some people that were Thai that could speak English, about this pollution.
mm,
And it was, we didn't realize, I think you probably knew there was something about pollution there, but we didn't realize the actual magnitude of it. And the guy that started to help me with my healing of my chronic back pain, he spoke broken English, and he said, oh, between March and August, people that live in Chiang Mai move out of Chiang Mai because the pollution gets really bad. Sometimes you can't go out of the house, and he started talking through it. And after my treatment, I said to Matt, we were talking to Dom the other day, who we knew was an English friend, or well, he's American but spoke English, obviously, in an American accent. I don't know if there's a bit more weight to this. And we were a bit like, oh, and we started looking on Google and da da da. And then we're like, well, we'll see how it goes. Now, a question for you is, do you remember the first point where you started to feel that pollution was affecting you, or was it a more graduated response?
I got my CPAP, didn't I? It was around about February time.
So Matt has got sleep apnea, which we've done an episode on, just for people that maybe don't know what CPAP is.
Yeah, so I have sleep apnea. I've had it for a long time, but I only actually rectified it in Thailand. That was mainly because I'd put it off for ages, but also actually you can just pay to go and have a sleep study there in a hotel, and it's the hospital, but it's like a hotel, and they basically just sort it all out. Which that compared to the UK as well is just an absolute nightmare in comparison. So I got that sorted, and there was points where I'd feel dizzy, I'd feel like off balance, I'd start feeling my heart rate be up a little bit, but it was hot and hydration, all that kind of stuff entered my mind. And then it was really around sleep, and it was really coincided with having the CPAP, the sleep apnea machine. I feel like it was those nights because I'd start waking up with a racing heartbeat. So before we went to Thailand, I got I had some tests in my whereas I just came back, I have like a bit of a abnormal heartbeat, which is normal to me.
Coupled with anxiety.
Yeah. So there's a touch of that before, but that didn't then impact me at all while we were away up to this point, did it?
Oh, I mean, we were living our best life. We had a moped. We found shops that sold English food. We
Yeah.
started to get into a routine of where to source things. We were doing, finding our step route. We found a gym. Like we did all the things that would build that foundation of a new life.
Yeah. And it was really in that house that we stayed in for that extended period of time when I got the CPAP that's where it started to, like I said, I'd wake up. First, it'd be a couple of times, and my heart rate would just be like my heartbeat would just be thumping out my chest. And obviously, I'd had these tests. I got some blood work done out there anyway, so I was using PEDs still while we were out there. Pulled down the dose anyway to like around 250 milligrams, which it was upwards of like 600 for a period of time.
Of test.
Of test and primo, and I'd had these tests. All my blood work came back clear, apart from cholesterol being elevated, which started to just mitigate with that. And then it just gradually got worse and worse in the sense of I'd be doing voice notes, I'd be doing feedbacks, and I'd just be forgetting words. I just wouldn't be able to concentrate. I would go to say a word and then it would just evaporate out of my mind. I'd get up, I'd feel lightheaded, I'd be off balance, and then my heart rate would start to be elevated. And then that's really where I started somewhat checking my heart rate. So I've got a blood pressure monitor, obviously being on gear, also does an ECG. And so therefore you can track your heart rate on there as well, because I wasn't wearing my watch at the time. And those things started to come back elevated. So my blood pressure would be up, not drastically, but it was elevated above where it would be normally. And when I start checking my heart rate would be like 110, 115. So this is just at rest, right? So I'm in an air conditioned place. And then I'd wake up more and more frequently. And then I went and got some more checks done, blood work, and then went in for a MRI. I got an MRI of my heart, got a full like heart scan, which came back that I had like a slightly enlarged one side, but like nothing that was raised for concern or anything like that. And all the other blood work and everything else came back fine. And then there was that night that I had my CPAP on. I woke up, put it back on in the morning, and then I was drifting off, and then I just saw like it was like a light or something. It was like I saw while my eyes were closed, and then my whole like side of my body went kind of numb. I aroused, or I thought I aroused out of sleep, but I still don't know to this point. went to say your name, couldn't say your name, felt like I just slurred my words or whatever, then that was like, I feel like I've had like some kind of stroke or TIA or whatever, which then obviously made me fucking panic like fuck. Because it all felt very real, but it could have been not real because I was like in and out of the consciousness side of stuff. So then ended up going to the hospital again, went into their version of A&E emergency. Great thing about that is you pay, so therefore you get seen straight away. Got a brain MRI, then got further tests so they could run all of the various dyes and stuff through your body. So I could basically see all my arteries and all of that kind of stuff. There was no signs of any negatives on my brain, which is surprising. And then there was also sort of like a thinning of blood vessels that will go into my left side of my neck and therefore the blood supply on this side. And then they thought they might have found a aneurysm, which was nice. So then when I went back to read the blood work with the neurologist, turns out the neurologist wasn't the person to read the blood work. She was like, you have got an aneurysm. And then when the specialist saw it, they were like, oh no, sorry, we just didn't zoom in close enough. So I was like, oh well, at least it means I'm not randomly going to die. But I'd got all of this, and then I'd started to read about pollution at the time and started to read about, because there was seemingly nothing was coming back saying there was anything wrong. So I obviously train, we obviously step. Cardio is not really, but like my
At the moment
diet,
in a
yeah, at the
diet.
moment cardio is in, which I'm upset about, but still, like that will continue outside of this. And I have done that a lot more outside of everything. But there was nothing coming back that was any kind of negative. Again, like apart from the LDL cholesterol being elevated, which I was taking medication to drop down, which was dropping down, everything else was absolutely bang on. So there was nothing coming back. My heart was good, my brain was good, blood vessels were good, blood pressure was elevated, heart rate was elevated. There was symptoms of like white cone syndrome. So again, going to get my blood pressure taken, I'd take it at home before I went to go and see anyone at the doctor because it would just elevate to be like 150 over like 80, 84. So again, just that first number being elevated is a pretty good sign that either your blood pressure cuff is off or you've got some kind of like fear of people taking that, which then that started to be a thing for me, is like going to hospital was like a negative. I could feel my heart rate elevating off the back of it. And this was where I'd start to check my heart rate, start checking my pulse, check my blood pressure more. I'd start to feel these things. Every night I was waking up 4, 5, 6, 7 times with a racing heartbeat. Um, and I was reading more about pollution and reading more about the scores. And so I started to check like the AQI, which is the air quality index, which you can use to, well, would probably not look at that if you have a penchant for numbers like I do. And I started to check this more frequently. So, for an example, like here in the UK where we are now, it might be like 17, maybe down to like 12, maybe up to like 30. In Thailand, where we were, it'd be like 280 up to 380, maybe even 400 sometimes. And what that is a measure of the pollutants or the particulates that are in the air. So this is like anything from your PM 2.5. So this is the size of the particulates. So those and below are like the really bad shit because they're really fine, really small, and therefore when they get pumped into your bloodstream, so you breathe them in, pumped into your bloodstream, and then they basically can disrupt and destroy your blood vessels, which then make them kind of like harder, and then you're more open to having things like plaque, which is then your sort of heart disease, things of that nature. But it also disrupts the electromagnetic pulse in your circulatory system. So that's what I believe now, knowing that was what was happening to me. So essentially, because I was having my CPAP and I was breathing in all of this. So if you haven't used a CPAP before, imagine having a vacuum cleaner and it's on suck, putting it on blow and then putting it in your face. That's essentially what it feels like, for want of a better term. My pressure was quite high and it was getting elevated as we were going through because you can control it. And it was based upon the feedback that I was getting. So the air outside was getting worse and worse because they were setting fire to all of the land and rubbish and all the bits and pieces. So that was getting worse. The windows and the aircon system in Thailand don't filter out these particulates, which is really difficult to find out about but I'm very persistent, and I found out about it. So then, reading about all of this, I reasoned that that was just driving that into my system. I had another episode where I had like some kind of seizure type thing and decided that I needed to do something about it because I was reading my Kindle at one point in bed, and this will forever be burned into my mind. And sat there for probably an hour in bed, chill, aircon on, heart rate just started to beat out of my chest. And I went and checked it, and it was 155 beats a minute. I remember seeing that vividly. And that freaked me the fuck out because I'm literally sat there, no activity. That'd be like decent deadlift, like for reps. Like I would probably expect to see maybe even lower than that for that. And then I started to research on the air filters and the air purifiers. So then I basically filled our house with air purifiers, and I noticed a difference in the amount of events that I was having, whatever you want to kind of call that. And I'd put them around my CPAP so the air around the CPAP was getting cleaned. I'd be moving them around the house. And it was at this point, it just started to kind of dominate my life. And I was still working at the time, didn't speak to anyone else outside about it because in my mind, it's on me. I have a job to do to look after the people that I'm looking after who are working with me. And it was frustrating the amount of times I'd have to like pause a voice note or pause a feedback, and I would get absolutely infuriated with myself because I am someone that I consider I function at a high level, and I don't say that in terms of being inflated in terms of my ego, in the sense of I like to think at a million miles an hour. I like to learn. I like to flow freely with my words. I find it very frustrating if there is something that is not a problem in front of me that I can tangibly touch, and this was something that I couldn't tangibly touch. I would go to say a word, I would go to be in a free flow so I can just articulate myself very, very well in in those moments where I'm talking about something that I'm passionate about, that I know about, that I care about. So when I'm talking about my clients, when I'm talking about taking them forward in terms of progress, then stumbling on my words, not being able to pick the words appropriately, luckily being able to pause them and make sufficient notes, etc., and where I needed to. So no one knew about it, and it wasn't on anyone else to know about it, but I needed to solve it because I wasn't getting any help necessarily from any of the tests that I was getting back, apart from clarification. I'll shout out Sam Pitchford on here, who we've spoken about before. He is an absolute elite human, and he's a powerlift, an absolute tanker of a human, and he's also well versed in like medical.
He's a nurse, isn't
Yeah, and he's seen like a lot of different various things. He also knows in and around kind of people who lift and do bits and pieces like that as well. So he was an invaluable kind of resource whilst I was there to basically just go, Matt, you're fine. Like you're like those aren't dangerous numbers. However, they were numbers that I'm fully aware that if they stayed and remained elevated, they wouldn't be great for my overall health. So it was at this point that it was like I was researching the air quality every single day, researching to like keep the levels down as much as possible, looking at kind of essentially air purifying our house to the nth degree. And it would be the case of if I went out for an extended period of time throughout the course of the day, either later that day, that night, or the following day, I would have periods where my hearing would go, my vision would be blurry. I definitely struggle to walk for more of an extended period of time. Even being out, I'd feel my heart rate race. I'd feel like confused. I'd feel, I guess, what I would say now would be anxious to a degree, but it wasn't the anxious as an anxiety anxious. It was a systemic anxious. It was a my body is my nervous system is stressed at this point, and that's ultimately what comes from pollution poisoning is your body is intaking all these particulates, and it is creating a massive oxidative stress across the board. So as I say, your circulatory system is just being disrupted. So my heart rate just couldn't regulate itself properly. My blood pressure was going to be elevated all the time. And then I started to feel that, and I started to be so in tune. So just like you can train, and you can, at the start of training, you're like, I can't really feel my biceps. I can't really feel my quads. I can't really feel what I'm doing. And fast forward like a few years, and you think about how many sets you've done over that time, you're like, oh fuck, I can feel my quads, like I can feel my biceps contracting, I can feel all of this. Like you imagine how many times in a day I can think about my heart rate, how many times in a day I can think about all of the things that are happening and being self-aware enough to um like focus on those points. It accelerated the timeline of that. So I become very, very in tune with my heart rate and all of the various different things. And then I started to check it more and more and more because I work very well off numbers and actual data and things like that versus this invisible thing. It was like I was just getting more and more clarification that this stuff wasn't getting magnanimously better. So then we started to look at other options in and around that time.
Mm. So from a perspective of being alongside Matt during that time, and this is why this episode might be useful for people that have anxiety and have people around them or have, struggles, however you want to frame that. Anxiety is a good way to frame it because this also led to health anxiety, which is essentially where Matt's talking about this increase in your understanding of it. It drove you to want to understand more and more and more and more. And you say that you're good with numbers, you're good with data, but it actually crippled you during this time because, and again, where I say this episode of having two realms of the story, as it were, if you're the person with anxieties or a health condition, or you have someone in your life that has anxieties, health conditions, etc., it can be useful to understand both sides, and that's why we said it'd be good to do this, wouldn't it? Wasn't it as well?
Mm.
Because for me, when you watch someone that you love disappear, essentially, like when Matt's talking through it, I can vividly see and feel what that's like to watch someone disappear and come so far away from the person that you fell in love with and you don't know what to do. And with it being the health anxiety side of things, a lot of it became manifestations of things that weren't there at times that started to, I've referenced this even today when we were in the shop and we were talking to someone that has a daughter with health anxiety. It's like there was, when we're back in the UK, there'd be one thing, and then suddenly it's like, oh, my arm's gone dead, I've got a headache, and suddenly there's a list of things, and it's just because you've been tripped up and brought back into where you were in Thailand, where you're checking everything, everything's going wrong, pending sense of doom. And we've spoken about this a lot. It doesn't just disappear, like I said at the start, and that from my standpoint is was very, very difficult. Like Matt was like a dog with a bone with the air purifiers as an example. You were obsessed.
Yeah, I think like if we like because the health anxiety was something that followed off the back of that.
But what you're describing with the obsession of data
Oh yeah,
and
like
the something would happen and then it would, and for the listeners that that is basically describing the health anxiety alongside the pollution poisoning as well.
yeah, that manifested the
Yeah.
health anxiety out the back of it. And when we talk about like the, being that dog with a bone, it's like I have to solve this thing that's happening. That is what my thing was in Thailand because it's not something, and this is the thing with anxiety or something that you can't. I'm
A
very
medical
I'm very
condition.
literal or visual or like if I can tangibly touch it. So you give me a physical problem, you give me stuff on paper that this is the problem, this is where I want to be. How do we get there? These are the tools that we've got. Cool, awesome. This is what's happening, and this was what's happening to me is that I can't see properly. I'm dizzy. I'm confused. I've I can't breathe properly. My heart rate is elevated. My blood pressure is elevated. All these things are happening. My tests are coming back clean. There's nothing feasibly physically wrong with me outside of that. There's something invisible that is impacting this. What is it? And then not being able to have those answers, like I have to go down that rabbit hole of doing it because it's affecting my life to that point where I can't function. And that's the point. Like I couldn't function. It was like a terrifying experience to feel myself losing myself very rapidly in the grand scheme of like from Christmas to that point. It was like in a matter of months. And with the air purifiers and everything else, yeah, it was like, even at the time, I knew that it was obsessive. I knew that it was, but it was like, I felt like I was going to die because it happened so quickly and it changed so fast. And it was like, now there were probably aspects where it's like, it might have been like a 8 out of 10, but the anxiety and the experience and all the things predicated made it a 9 out of 10, or at the time it felt like a 10 out of 10, but it was actually a 15 out of 10. And then when we sort of decided to move, and it was like we do certain things, so turn the air purifiers off and turn them back on again, be like it was worse without them, going out and doing those kind of things. And then it got to the point where I had the meeting with the neurologist who was overseeing all my CPAP stuff, because my levels were getting better. They were still like elevated, but they were better than they were. And I said, I've got all of this and I've got all of this data and I've got all this information. I paid for additional consults with this person, which is a really cool thing that you can do in Thailand, is like you can just pay to have a consult with a medical professional, which is sick. Because like I got a hell of a lot, and I attribute that lady to being why I am so far along with my CPAP and being so good with my sleep as I am now, why I use it so religiously, is because I learned so much in the importance of doing that. But it got to the point where I asked her and I said, look, this is all the data I've got. These are all the references. These are all studies I've got. These are all the citations I've got. Like, do you think that this is feasibly pollution poisoning? And that's what I'm experiencing. And she went, yeah, like from what you've said, and your options are you either take medication to manage that or you move and find out. And the thing with moving is ultimately your red blood cells and the impact that it has over that extended period of time takes about 3 months for it to clear and recirculate into fresh blood cells and everything else for it to level out. And the option of just managing it with medication, obviously the issues, and I speak with this clients who are in medical professionals anyway, is like you end up taking more medication to manage other medication to manage other medication, and that's not how I want to live my life. So we I made the choice that we were gonna try and move somewhere else. And it was like at that time, obviously, where you had surgery as well. So it's like that was less than ideal. But I was in a absolute mess. And it was just like the most horrendous, thinking back on it now, like it seems like another person kind of lived that life. And there were so many horrendous times during that time where it was like it's like an immovable object meets an unstoppable force in terms of scenarios and situations that you have to go through. And it's like I just wanted to teleport out of that scenario and situation, but it wasn't practically achievable to kind of do that. And we tried to move somewhere else in Thailand. That didn't make it any better. Tried to move to Bali. That didn't make it any better. Did for a bit, but then even just being out and about, and anyone who's been to Bali knows that there's like quiet parts, but then there's busy parts. And when it's like mad traffic, there's a lot of pollution there. They obviously set fire to shit. Bought another air purifier over there. The air quality was bad one particular day. I was doing check-ins all day, came back, chest pain, heart rate racing, all the other stuff. Didn't even think about it. I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't conscious about it because I didn't check it before. But that all happened, and I checked it, and I was like, wow, the air quality was like 320 something. I think it was 328. So I went and bought an air purifier there, and then obviously we moved to the Netherlands for a period, and I felt the notable air quality improvement in terms of breathing when we were there, but I was still getting these ramifications of that, which is explainable in the sense of I still have that in my system. I still have those impacts, but it was more when we got back to the UK that it was realizing the health anxiety side of stuff had kind of embedded itself in my mind. Whereas if I felt my heart rate go up a little bit, I felt stressed a little bit, I felt anything like that, then it just led to a spiral. And that's where I didn't realize I've never had anxiety as such before. I felt anxious in the sense of you're excited for something or a little bit nervous about something. I felt that level of anxiety, but I've never had something that anyone's explained to me before as anxiety, and certainly of what I've experienced as of it now, I've never had that before in my life. And I didn't realize the ramifications of doing all of the checks that I was doing whilst I was away and being so, like you say, like in terms of the data collection and the numbers and everything else, and it kind of ended up crippling me in the sense of doing that. That was embedded in my brain at that point. And when, if it fires together, it wires together, right? So all of that AQI, checking the air quality, looking at all of that, thinking about my heart rate, listening to my heartbeat, not through, necessary intent. Anyone who's like, falling asleep at times and you're kind of dozing off in certain positions, you can kind of hear your heart rate or heartbeat, or you can see like your pulse. That stuff used to kind of trigger me off. Um, and it became the point of like wanting to solve it so bad and feel better that it would be like checking my pulse and checking my heart rate, regularly. Like we're not talking like, a couple of times. It'd be like 40 minutes, 50 minutes, multiple times through the course of the day. And this isn't to even say about like how doing that impacted when we were in Thailand, the fact that I wasn't able to go outside and spend time walking and going and doing like cardio or even going to the gym because elevating my heart rate just spiraled me out, and I'd be worried about doing all of those things. And it was like I lost so many portions of myself over that time. I became this sort of air quality expert and obsessed individual to try and cure my body and forgot about my mind. And if I was speaking to myself back then now, I would instruct myself to, yes, focus on your body and getting your body well again and functioning well, but do not underestimate the power of your mind, and do not lose track of everything that you're doing, everything that you're saying and reinforcing in yourself, because that will have more of a magnitude of effect on the downstream and the rest of the portion of your life than you can even imagine right now from the physical manifestations of that. And I think I'd only listen to myself in that, in the sense of not listening to anyone else, because I would trust myself to the highest degree because I know me inside and out, and I could explain it to myself in that. And if I could have that, it would have changed the trajectory of where everything would be. And I would say that to anyone that is listening, that is sort of stuck in whether it's their mind or it's something they're battling through with their body. And it's something I speak to clients about, where it's like, if you get yourself caught up in like negative talk to a degree, like imagine talking to a friend that way. But if you were to advise yourself and you were to look at yourself and you were to take yourself through the scenario that you're going through, you have to like not be doing it whilst you're in an emotional state of doing it. So when you come back to that point and try and talk yourself through it and advise yourself through it, if I was to do that and I was to able to have that thought now, and this is kind of the thought that I have now to help myself with it, is I've lived it, I've breathed it, I've experienced it, and I'm here and I'm fine and I'm okay. And at that time, that wasn't there. And that started to spiral in the sense of feeling like it was just going to be worse and worse and worse. Because again, it was an untangible, untouchable, unseeable thing that was impacting me. And then that led to the untangible, unseeable, untouchable thing of anxiety and health anxiety more specifically, because I wasn't anxious about whatever else happened in my life. I was anxious about if I was going to be alive. And that was because, in my mind, that was the closest I've been to having something where I wasn't going to be here, because my whole feeling in my body was that fight or flight perpetually every single day, multiple times a day, all of the time. And it was that impending sense of doom when something was going to happen, but it actually never did. Apart from those times where I went into the hospital off the back of whether it was a seizure, whether it was not a seizure, I don't know. But it was the cascade of events that then led to doing that. And that was my mind and the circumstance that led to that point. But the health anxiety that came out the back of it would mean we could be walking, and like I got a period of time right where you can go on my content, and there's like periods of time where I was wearing glasses because I couldn't, like, my eyes weren't functioning the same way that they were previously. We got back, I had like a hearing test, and I had like the bits of pollution had like clogged up my ears and all of my hearing and my balance, and that's what led to my balance being off. And it was all of these things that I didn't really realize, and I didn't wasn't able to read about it because it's quite difficult to read about these various things. But yeah, the health anxiety that came off the back of it was potentially worse than the actual physical acts that kind of came with it, because that was something that again I struggled even more on because I can't see it, I can't touch it, I can't feel it. Am I someone who has anxiety? I've never had anxiety before. Why would I have anxiety? Um, so yeah.
So I'd say as well, with that example there where I started to talk about it, that this again can be a good internal reflection for people that do have anything we're talking about today, or some level of, mental health struggles, as it were. That you can see how I started to talk and Matt's like, well, and then, and that's the thing, when it's happened to you, when it's happening to you, as you said, you don't listen to anyone else. You would listen to yourself.
Mhm.
Now, figuratively speaking, you trust me with your life, and what we've worked on throughout our relationship from a mindset standpoint, both ways, has been phenomenal. But during this time, and this is where I say, if this is you that has any level of mental health that you want to explore, it becomes it's but this is happening to me, but I want to fix it. This is happening to me. And then the ones closest to you, it can be extremely difficult to get through to someone that is in this mode of, and this is where I started to describe before you started talking about the obsession. It became where you'd hide checking your blood pressure because we agreed you do it a certain amount of times a day, and you go off and hide it, or you so other people would be like, you're gonna check your boyfriend's phone. I'd come in the bedroom and you're there, you'd see me and you'd be like, no, I'm not doing it. And it's a great experience for us now to do this live on the podcast because we didn't know where this would go, because it becomes the story of you. It does, because this is the thing. I touched on right at the start that I can slip back into victim mentality. Victim mentality doesn't have to be a negative. It's when a lot of stuff happens to you and you're waiting for the next thing to happen, and you almost want the next thing to happen because it's like, well, just throw it all at me. Just keep giving me shit. We've spoken about this. You're ready for the next thing rather than, I'm going to wrap this around. It's going to be a positive. I'm okay. I'm okay.
I definitely didn't want another thing to happen while that was happening. Absolutely not.
No, but what I'm saying is you're looking for negatives all the time. You can get into that. What I'm talking about, my experience of
Mm,
when I was in a victim mentality, I'd be thinking, well, whatever's going to happen to me is going to happen to me because I've had all this shit. So what worse can happen? I'm ready for it.
mm,
Rather than, I don't want it. I'm not saying you're saying I want more to happen to me. It's part of when you're in a mentality where you're anxious, where you're, highly sensitive, where things are happening to you, you start to perceive that more negatives will come at some point, or this is going to get worse.
mm,
Like you can't see it's going to get better when it's happening to you.
mm,
And I say this from a point of view of, I would try and talk to you, right? You would say to me, I'm having a brain scan. So I'm thinking, and I'd say to you, this brain scan is going to be great because if this comes back all clear, that'll give you relief. And you said to me, "Oh, I can't wait to have this brain scan. It's going to give me relief." You came back from the brain scan. Right, I'm going to book another scan. I need to get my lung scanned. There was no relief at all.
mm,
So from a supporter's side of the story, as it were, or however we want to frame this, I'm at home thinking, right, he's having a brain scan. We might get a day where I can see you maybe a bit happier, maybe a bit of relief, because it takes the other person's life as well.
mm.
and you came back, there's nothing wrong there. Right, I'm booking a lung scan. I'm going to book my blood. So I'm going to book. And I remember it vividly. And I don't know if you, and I was like, can we sit down and just process your brain is okay? Like we've got some light here. We've got some hope here. Yeah, I know, but it's not that, so it must be something else. Like
Mm.
this isn't normal. This can't just be anxieties. This is, and that's the difficulty because it does become obsessive, irrational, however you want to frame that. And this is not me trying to throw negative connotations at you. It's the honest version of when something of this magnitude is happening to you, you can't see the hope.
Mm.
You can't see it because you're in the thick of it. And this is why, as I say, it's a great example for people to listen to that are on the outside looking in or are on the inside to it's very hard if you're not getting the quantifiable answers you wanted because you wanted quantifiable answers, but there wasn't any.
Yeah.
So someone's listening, and they're thinking, what's wrong with me?
Mm.
It's very difficult to see anything past that. And if I'm honest, when I say you were disappearing, if that had gone any further and if I wasn't who I was
Hmm.
and we had the relationship we had,
Hmm.
if you were an independent on your own in Thailand or you were with a partner that you didn't communicate, because we communicate, you can probably pick it up, guys, we're very, we communicate about fucking everything. If you didn't have that and you were in a relationship you weren't happy with, say,
Mm.
I could, joking aside, as severe as it sounds, I could see that you would want to end it.
Mm.
Because, no joke, when you see to experience that, but you can't get through. You know what I mean? And it's like that one time in our whole relationship where you snapped at me was
Mm.
in the midst of this. And even you went, what the fuck have I just done?
Yeah.
Because I was just asking you a question. And you turned around and snapped at me, and I was like, this is going too far now because this is not you. This
Mm.
is not you. And it's very difficult because I'd be doing the cooking, I'd be doing the cleaning, I'd be propping stuff up, I'd be remembering everything for the two of us. I'd be trying to seek, I started getting your clients to do testimonials for you, video ones, so I could show you it and go, look, you're still, because you were still doing your job. Like you said, no one knew. No one knew. None of my clients knew until we were ready to start telling people and what have you, because we're so hell bent on our job being how it needs to be. And then obviously I had the news, as you've mentioned, about surgery. 4 weeks after my surgery, we had to fly to Bali and then fly back here. And I'm in a wheelchair, and this is the thing with when you come out the back of this, if you're suffering at the moment with something like this, the people that are sticking by you, it's important to, when you're ready to, try to reconnect with them and explain how it's felt. And when you can be more rational, to give back to that. But also, if you're the supporting person, try not to forget yourself because it's difficult. Because you can't, there's not, you're not living because it would wildly sway from within 30 seconds.
Mm.
And it's really difficult. And then you said, when we get back to the UK, I'll be fine. And then it was another 3 months of the obsession, speaking to Sam, who you mentioned. And he was the one that basically said you had health anxiety.
Yeah.
But you could see as soon as I mentioned the health anxiety, that was almost a trigger for you to then talk about it. And again, that's a really good example. And this is why I'm glad it's gone this way. Because however difficult it is for you or I, this could offer people real life anecdote to understand it more.
Mm.
Because we've talked about triggers, haven't we? And even today we spoke about them this morning of the things that do trigger you. And maybe that would be an organic way to go from here to, the struggles you still have now.
Mm.
Because it's not gone.
No, it's not.
But it's what it is. And this is such an important message for guys on it. If you've experienced something that's traumatic, the pollution in this example,
Mm.
there's a fuck ton of shit that can come off the back of it. And this is where people do not get the mental health support. Because Z thing is gone, you're fine. And
Mm.
it's not. because the backlash of what's happened with the pollution, like you said, led to health anxiety and has led to life-changing circumstances because we don't know when you're going to get hit and
Mm.
you're still working out triggers.
Yeah.
And you found that with your quantifiable mind, I feel like you're at a stage where you're actually excited, probably is not the right word, but you're intrigued to learn your brain more and respect the times where you do get anxiety and not beat yourself up about it continuously. Because
Yeah.
that's hard, isn't it, for both of us?
Yeah.
And this is not about me, but if you're sharing your life with someone and it's,
I think it's such a dramatic shift from who I was before Thailand and then what was able to be because we've worked on it in, like you said, we've done loads of work on me
yeah, but
on my
and
project.
me, I've spoken about in the pod,
Yeah.
my relationship with food, myself. What we unearthed with that was that also was something we needed to work on with you.
Yeah, and my big thing around my own physique and where I want to go and what I want to do with that was something that we addressed. And that was then something that was taken away in my ability to do my normal stuff. And that's one of the big things that I struggled with being away and feeling that is I couldn't work properly, couldn't think properly, couldn't train, couldn't step, couldn't go outside, couldn't enjoy the things that I wanted to do. I got focused on the things that I didn't have, couldn't do. And the things that I could do was research and try and make myself feel better, but it turns out that that kind of made stuff worse in a certain degree.
Yeah, there's two sides to that.
Yeah, there's two sides to
There's
that, and
answers and
that's
then
but my
wanting more answers.
yeah, but my mind will lead down that door, like and this is where I go with what I do as a job, right? Is I will look at a door, I will open it, and there's 20 more doors behind, and then I want to go through each one of those doors and open those, and the 10 or 15 behind that. And this was the thing with the pollution side of stuff is I went down and through all of those doors and came back out and found more things. And it was difficult to separate between what was the physical manifestation of the physical impact of breathing in those particulates and what was the physical manifestations of the psychological trauma that was a result of the physical things that happened and separate those two things and quantify what that was. And I spoke on the things when I said, I would get back to the UK, it'd be fine. I spoke on things that I didn't fully understand. And that's on me to kind of say that and be like, well, I believe that it will be fine because I could never understand what would come from all of that. And that was, we'd be walking, I'd feel dizzy, I'd feel spaced out. And the thing with anxiety is, and this is something that I've learned, is you can have physical reactions from an emotional thought process. So your body can generate a physical response from you having a thought, or not even a thought, a feeling. And that feeling would be, I don't know how many times in my life I would have felt like a slight pain in my chest. Probably the amount that I used to train chest quite a lot. But that would never think about anything apart from fucking hell, I'm probably getting bigger. Amazing. That's great. Now it will
Which is
be,
where I'm at.
I'm gonna,
Just for a
yeah,
side note,
yeah. All right, story.
I feel pain and I'm like, oh, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah. I feel pain and I'm just basically buried myself in the garden with the rabbits. Um, but that's where those things now like have completely different ramifications. Like we'd be walking to the gym at times and my heart rate would go up and it'd be like, I can't train today. And it took all of that away. And this is where my identity got completely remapped for a good period of time and what I actually wanted to do versus what I could do. And that's where now where I'm at this point is I'm pushing myself because this is the first time that I felt since then, which is over a year ago now. I feel like I can actually push myself because before it was just baby steps because I'd be sat on the stairs, counting my heart rate, as you say, hiding it from you because Not because I was like ashamed of doing it, but because I knew that I shouldn't be doing it because it wasn't making it any better. And that's again that what fires together wires together.
That's the
But when
big point
there's
there.
what?
You realized it wasn't productive to do it to the volume you were, but you were still almost relapsing, as it were. It's like an addict, isn't it?
Yeah, it
It's like
was
you would still do it, and when I say I'd walk in on you checking, just to clarify, I'm not some crazy, but we sat down, and this is again from someone trying to support someone else. We sat down and said, right, we're going to reduce how many times you're checking. It might sound wild to people because it's like, what? But when he says he was checking multiple times a day, as you extended anyway, and I'm not trying to butt in here, but this is an important part, is that, so I am butting in, but um, that we sat down to try and put a plan together to make it better and more controlled. That's why it became, like I say, I walk in and you'd be like, and you try and hide it. But we were trying to work
I
to,
just said I was wanking instead. I've just been like,
but we came together, didn't we, and tried to make a plan, is what I'm saying. Because people listening, right, that have an issue with food, food relationship, if they self-restrict and go to the gym more, or the things that are common in the bodybuilding space, and
yeah,
offset it on the episode that goes live next week, you get very clever. You get
yeah,
very clever
sure.
because it is disordered ways of thinking. And again, it's putting weight on that, but it's very hard to not do those things. It's almost like you were getting a dopamine hit from doing it, but at times I think, and joking aside, it was like you were unconscious when you were doing it.
Mm,
It was more than a habit. It was more like it was like you were possessed,
yeah.
and it probably felt like that.
Mm.
And again, I don't want to, try and take the conversation, but it's relatable, and this is what I want from this episode as well, to relate to the listeners.
Oh yeah, like when you're when you're doing it at the time, it was predicated off I needed to know that I was okay. However, I was trying to judge that. And I would say that it wasn't being okay in the moment. It was knowing that I was making progress of being okay in the tandem time between weeks or months or whatever it was. Because it was such a fall from grace to go from where I was with my physique, with my mind, with like as we say, like clients didn't know, not because it was like deceitful or anything like that. It was because
We've got
I
pride.
don't I don't want my clients to worry about me in the sense of something that they can't help, they can't aid, and they don't need to worry about that aspect.
And you're proud
I
of
need to
yourself.
worry about them and look after them. And that kept me going for that point of time because that focus on them enabled me to have clear direction and I guess to have purpose and to feel valued in a sense and to not let myself go all the way down the spiral of what was going on. And I was fully aware of how that was spiraling, but it gave me a drive to sort it out and solve it. And it was the same with the anxiety, but the solving of the pollution was not easy, but in comparison to what since we've been back in the UK, I've had to deal with, we've had to deal with, but like I've had to come to terms with, and that's probably the best way to describe it is coming to terms with all of the thoughts, the feelings, like those feelings of, checking my pulse and reasoning with myself of whatever I might need to reason myself with around doing that. And if you looked at it, if you watched it, it would look insane.
Netflix series.
It would look mental, literally, because it was. And it's only you who's going through that. And this is the point, right? Like people can support you and people can give you help and be there and do literally everything to look after you and all of those things. But the human brain and this is stuff that I find fascinating, and even more so now, but not in a worrying way, so don't worry anyone. Um, but it's such an advanced learning system, and I feel like most of us don't fully comprehend how truly amazing our brains are. Yes, everybody. And how we use them really does matter, but how we abuse them probably matters more. And I abused mine in the sense of I took it for granted that I could do all of these things and there wouldn't be some kind of ramification later on down the line that would not just be a psychological issue, but would be a physiological issue as well. So, me checking myself, if I was to do it now, like right now here, I could do it, I could flip my phone over, I could press the start button, do like a 15 seconds, 17 seconds, whatever it was. It takes about 2 seconds for you to actually put your finger on your arm, just in case anyone's wondering. So then do 15 seconds and then 15 seconds time by four over that. Well, I could do it and then not think about it for the rest of the day. You asked me to do that a few months ago, I would do it perpetually over time, over time, over time, and I'd wonder what it is through the course of the day.
And that's where I'd see you do it. You do it under your jumper like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because
So
it's
we'd be
just,
sitting and he'd just stop talking, and I'd be like,
mm,
and he drifted off because you did start drifting off at times and stuff. And I'd see you put your fucking fingers under your jumper and you're checking your pulse. And I'd go, you checking your pulse? Yeah, no, I'm just doing a quick check. And again, it's like, but it's back to that. It sounds so bizarre to the outside world. And if you can have someone that you can be who supports you properly, unconditionally, but it still doesn't alleviate much.
no, it doesn't, because you have to address it in your mind, like with the anxiety feeling that I had and how it would spiral. I then focused on, so I'd be at the gym and I'd look out the window on the treadmill and I'd have to focus on the sky, focus on a car, focus on the trees, listen to my feet on the
But that's
treadmill.
good.
I'd listen to the music and I'd listen to somebody talk, or I'd tap the actual thing. And it was only when I started to do that, and the bathroom will forever be a haunting place to a certain degree. That light going on, the extractor fan going on, sitting in there for however long. But now I can do that, and it's not as it once was. And the reason it was that way, and the association of the bathroom being like that, is because of all those months and all of those times. And I started to turn the tide of that. So when I'd be in there, it'd be like listening to the extractor fan, listening to the dripping tap. And if the tap wasn't dripping, you just turn it on. Fuck the water bill, right? And then tap my foot or tap on the side of the bath and just focus on those points. And having spoken to clients with anxiety, other people with anxiety, read copious amounts about it. You hear about this, right? Like focus on three things, focus on three sounds, focus on something a distance away, bring yourself back. And what you're really trying to do is focus on the present moment as opposed to focus on the spiraling moments that happen in your mind. And this is what I talk to about the massive, amazing benefits that you have of your brain and the damaging parts that you have of your brain, because you can be your greatest adversary or you can be your greatest supporter in those thoughts. And when it comes to anxiety, it starts with a little thing or it starts with a big thing, and then those things get bigger, like a snowball effect, but on steroids. And if you are on steroids, then on steroids times two. So being able to recenter yourself and bring yourself back. And I've noticed this when I work, when I sit down and do check-ins, when I go through data for a client, when I'm there and I'm present, my anxiety, it can be, before I do those things, it can be a 7 or 8 or a 9 out of 10. Start focusing on those things and it comes right back down. I read a book, comes back down, and I can center myself. Why? Because I'm being present. So doing those things taught me to be present. Doing those things in the gym started to bring me back into the present moment and give me some anchor point. So I'm in the world, something happens, I start to float up into anxiety city. I throw the anchor down, I start to pull myself back down, recenter myself, and I can carry on back with my day. And just like I spiraled the opposite way, so I spiraled in the sense of checking myself all the time, doing all that, I started to turn the tide of that. So it was like 99% of the time I was checking my pulse and doing everything else, and 1% of the time I was trying not to do that. And it was 2%, then it was all the way to 50%. And now I'd say it's 90%, maybe even 92, 93%. I am doing the opposite things to drive my anxiety. And then the other times I'm still doing those things where it's anxiety. And those things are, we watched a program that was about health stuff. That was New Amsterdam Hospital. Amazing, amazing
So
series. I
good.
really fucking like it.
And I don't get to
But
watch it anymore, by the way.
no, unless you watch it by yourself while I'm checking my pulse. Then we couldn't watch that after a certain point because I was just noticing that I was going to bed. I was feeling anxious. I was feeling my heart rate go up. All of these various different things. So that is something I've spoken to people about, other people who have medical things, medical issues. That seems to spark it off.
You can come home, can't you, from PT? You've got a client that works in a hospital, and she can be talking about various people, can't she?
Mm,
And you come home and you get dumped with anxiety. Just a real life example, you know.
mm. Yeah. So yeah.
What other triggers would you? They're the main ones, aren't they?
Yeah. Also anything that I feel weird in my body. I have to fight that urge to think that I'm gonna die. Um
Like you've had like a dot in your eye, or
yeah, like I've still got in my left eye, which is also the eye that doesn't track properly. So I've still got damage in that eye from when we were away. Still got like bits and pieces that float around in there.
sometimes it can be more prominent, and that can.
Oh yeah, like well obviously my CPAP sometimes that blows loads of air into my face and then my eyes will be really bloodshot. I don't really check my eyes that much anymore. If I go blind, then I just know that I won't have dreams anymore. Um,
You've also found, so from a coming back from sort of a trigger standpoint of those things that you've spoken about, you know, essentially being present is probably the biggest thing you've learned is a mechanism and a tool to come away from a panic attack potentially, or you know, anxiety crippling you as it were, that you started reading again. And from a supplement standpoint,
mm,
the L-theanine has been good.
yeah, I
Like anecdotal things that people could think about.
yeah. So caffeine for me is not good.
Sensitive.
I am sensitive.
I have my coffee in the morning, guys. I was there. Is no function for this BB.
No, to be fair, like I was saying to Morgan the other day, like I haven't had coffee, like caffeine, coffee, basically throughout this whole diet, and he was like,
This
I
is
don't know how you do it.
this is a deal breaker, guys. This is an issue. No, joking aside, I love coffee. I love having it, but if
I
it's
love coffee as well.
yeah. But what we've done is
I I,
we've
I
got
love
decaf though.
I love not having anxiety more than I love coffee.
Yeah,
But if I ever feel like an anxiety attack, triple espresso.
yeah. But we have
So
a
if I ever want to split
decaf.
test how good I am at managing my anxiety, I can have coffee and I can find out.
We have said recently
Or
though, haven't
Monster.
we, with the ability to test yourself. Now this is probably where we're at right now. If we bring this forward to now, is that we've sort of started to experiment with almost testing yourself a bit. Not to, we don't want to bring on a full anxiety attack or a panic attack, but
Check the
there's
live stream.
yeah, there's that we're establishing more so with the triggers. Again, having the communication with your partner or who you live with or people at work, etc., the things that might trigger you, is that actually then do you expose yourself to those things on a lesser degree to do what you just said, to test where you're at. Now that takes, in my mind, a huge level of self-awareness and stability in your life to facilitate that. Now, if it was the last time you got anxieties, as an example, was of an evening, you'd done all your work, you'd done your training, we'd done our steps, and it hit in the evening. So the first thing I said to you was for reassurance, because if Matt has anxiety come and he's still got check-ins to do, or he hasn't been to the gym, or he hasn't done the steps, that is a far worse anxiety episode than if you've done all your stuff.
Hmm.
So, as an example, when that happened, I said straight away as reassurance, well, you've done all these things. Now, as we've touched on in this episode already, when you're trying to communicate with someone that's feeling anxieties, reassurance doesn't probably give the gravitas that you're trying to give. Like, it'd be easy for me to think, well, that'll make Matt feel fine, but I know now it's not gonna. However, we're at a point with your anxieties, and this is where I say you've come so far that you can gain clarity from it. It doesn't make it disappear. But if I'd said to you in Thailand, yeah, but you've done a gym session, I mean, it would be like you wouldn't even hear me say it. Whereas now I say, yeah, but you've done your steps, you've done the gym, you've done all your check-ins, you've done your work, you've done your food prep. On this day, you've done everything. Should we ever lay down and have a cuddle? That's probably the quickest turnaround you've had
Mm.
from an anxiety episode. And that was recently, and we're talking, as you said, a year on. And that wouldn't have touched the sides before. It wouldn't have
No.
done anything, but it also probably would have annoyed you. If I said, yeah, but you've done your gym. So again, the self-awareness needs to be there from both parties also,
Mm.
because I could easily go, yeah, but I'm telling you all this positive stuff. You should be fine. You should be feeling better. It does not work like that. What's the name of this podcast? An extension beyond condition, the voice, giving you a voice. Because if people don't understand anxiety around you, to a certain degree, they can't help you.
No.
Because, and I've seen it with people that have anxiety, their partners, their support network, maybe even their coach, because this is a bodybuilding podcast, they're not helping you, to put it bluntly. And this
Mm.
is not to slag off any of your partners or whatever else, but it also takes a level of emotional intelligence for that person and for you to be able to even communicate on a basic level,
Mm.
because it got to the point where like we'd say, oh, we'll eat in half an hour, 2 hours go by, I haven't heard a word from you because you're researching pollution.
Mm.
And your concept of time then, I mean, it was, well, it wasn't a concept of time, was it? We can joke about it now, but it would be like the days were just, we're in this world of not knowing what's happening. And this is again, when you talk about anxieties or mental health related things, we said this at the start, it doesn't just go away. There's a knock-on effect. And
Well, I was listening to that podcast the other day, wasn't it?
good example of what
So
we've
you,
defined as a trigger potentially.
yeah. So again, we listened to this podcast and it was in a relaxed setting. It was about solving anxiety, funnily enough, um,
And quantifiable data.
and quantifying stuff. But the ramifications later on where I just felt anxious. I felt terrible, really bad. Um, and I realized that so before talking about the pollution stuff, talking about all of that, when we came back,
That was a no-go.
I avoided talking to anyone about it.
And I couldn't.
No. And I couldn't have that without then, like, if I'd tried to do this, even the first 5 minutes, 3 minutes
We
of
couldn't even talk
this,
to our parents.
no.
It
And then the rest of the day would be fucked. Like there'll be nothing happening for the rest of the day, probably nothing happening for the rest of the other days, apart from my clients. You'll get your check-ins and you'll be none the wiser. Same with messages and all of that stuff, but maybe a few pauses here and there, but it would be quality. And that has changed because I would avoid talking about it. Like you'd mention it to someone, and I'd be like, "Well, you can talk about it." Like
But when
because
I
I
realised it was triggering you, we had to just
oh yeah, just
not
not
talk
talk
about
about
it.
it because it just wasn't helping. It was making everything worse.
But again,
And
that's the self-awareness to owning that it's a trigger
oh yeah,
and telling me because you didn't
mm,
tell me for a bit. So I'd be there yapping on
mm,
because people would say, "Oh, why do you live in Stoke-on-Trent?" And I'm not from Stoke. And then I tell we went to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
again, another golden nugget there is to if there is something that triggers you and someone around you is doing said thing, tell them.
Mm.
Don't hide it or
You've
feel bad.
got to link those things together as well, though. It's almost like when we'd go outside in Thailand. It was like you go outside, feasibly be fine in the day. Hours later or the following day, hot, da, 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 all the other stuff.
And
And
we're
it's
talking a
only after a
crash.
while that I was like, "Ugh, I was going outside and doing this and experiencing this over this period of time." And it's like you have to talk about certain things. Like we didn't realize it was the hospital program until I was like, well, let's just try not watching it before bed. That was better. Dead Star not watching it at all. Okay, well that's way better because it's just not a thing. And then same in terms of like what you mentioned when people talk about it, it's like, and then listening to this podcast, listening to the podcast, it was helpful in the sense of there were points in there, but what isn't helpful, wasn't helpful from my understanding and my perspective, is this woman described the fact that she had it from basically when she was born until she was 60, and it got fucking worse and worse and worse. And for me, hearing that is that I don't want this forever. I like if it was an actual element I could remove, I would remove it. But I'm aware, and her talking about it is like once it's there, it's never going away. It's this thing that if you feed it, it will then become more and more and more and more, and then it will overwhelm.
She did say it could go away, but you
But she,
don't hear that
but
bit.
that's the point. Is like she drove home those points, and those points were before she said that, and it's like that was what was in my mind, and then she started talking about all the other stuff. But it's like I've in my mind tried the things that she said, where she was like, "I'm okay, I'm fine," and da, 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 da. I've tried chanting that, and I did that the other day when I had that anxiety, and we were laid down. And that's what I was speaking to myself about. That actually helped.
Yeah, it
But it's
does.
like those things for someone who's got anxiety, and this is why when you do talk to someone about it, and this is why I don't like small talk with other people in general, because um, ultimately people use filler words. People won't even let you finish the sentence, and then they'll give you, and it's not inherently a bad thing because people want to help most of the time. But when people want to help on something they don't talk about, they just say pointless shit. So then it becomes you're not actually helping. You're saying stuff, and that stuff that you say could be potentially triggering to that person, which again isn't necessarily your fault because you don't realize. But it's one of the reasons that like talking to people about it and stuff like that is like I don't want someone to try and solve what is going on. If they're just asking about it, I don't need you to solve it. I'm trying to do that. But in all seriousness, like listening to things like that, and this is the route that I would go down, hence why I went down the pollution route and everything else. I would also say be mindful of that in understanding how you perceive or understand information and how you will react to hearing something, because it's not until you hear something that it's out there then, and then it is in your mind. And if you have a catastrophic avalanche of thought processes that come off the back of that, and I was able to control mine because I recognized it and I thought, fucking hell, she said that thing. And I was like, well, it's not actually that bad. And it was like, well, you weren't born with it. So therefore it was like, okay, you weren't born with it, you have it, but you've managed to control it and bring it back, and it's escalated, and actually it's a fraction of what it was before, and this is all happening in like a second, and she's managed to bring it down, and then it's like, okay, well those things have happened, and it's like, and then I've brought myself back down off the back of it, but that thing's still there, just like I've checked my pulse multiple times over a period of time, so chances are if I do that again and I carried on doing it, it would come back a lot sooner than it would originally. The first few times I did it wasn't ingrained as a habit. It was just something that I'd done. Whereas now, if I was to do that and bring that back, I've kind of like tying your
feeling.
shoelaces a certain way, right? If you tie your shoelaces a certain way, I show you how to tie them a different way, and then say every time you're tying them the way that you want to do it, no, you have to tie them the other way. It's going to feel weird for fucking ages until eventually you do that. But then you go back to tying shoelaces the original way, and you're like, oh yeah, this feels familiar. I can get back into doing this. Probably an easy way of like just recognizing how your brain works is like because that's something that's ingrained in your brain. That's the thing that you're doing, and that's where I say your brain and your mind is such a wild place. It's like a supercomputer that just learns and has stuff that it takes on board all of the time. And you don't fully have the understanding of the ramifications of those things. And that's where watching some of those things, having some of those things, I wasn't conscious of the fact that it was impacting me, but my subconscious was, and that's why I was waking up with heart palpitations and all the stuff that came off the back of it. And then my actual conscious mind had to go, oh, actually, yeah, it's probably something fucking up that you're watching or that's happening, that something's going on. You need to change that. And that's where I say, like, if I hadn't have fed my mind the things that I have, and that's where I try and feed my mind all of these, not even positive things, just sort of reinstall normality, whatever that is. And that's where doing the diet that I'm doing now and pushing myself is I tried to push myself multiple times when we got back, go to the gym, go and train hard, go and bury yourself in a session. Then I would feel fucked, wiped out. Again, take you back to what happens when all of the pollution and everything else is going on. Your nervous system's fucked. My nervous system was fried from just being on fight or flight all of the time, a perpetual cycle of stress that was just going through my mind and my body. And then now it's not. Now it's much more still. I'm much more calm. I'm completely different to how I was before we went to Thailand. And I'm much more, way more different than I am when we came back from Thailand. But that has been every single minute of every single hour of every single day up till a fair few months ago. And then now I can go through a day and go through a week and go through a month, and the amount of impact that those things have had are like vastly reduced. And I also believe that they will just become less and less and less, but they won't do that without my input because it was my input that put them there. It was external factors that created that input, but it was my input that put that there, and it will be my input turning it the other way that will turn it the other way. And that's what I can take from that woman saying that you can reduce it or remove it is you can, because if you can fire it that way, one way, you can absolutely fire it that way, the other way. But you have to know what the things are triggering it. You have to know that it's going to be all right. And you have to be willing to work on it. And that's what you can take away from this in the sense of the bodybuilding side of stuff. Is the mind and the body are interlaced. And something that I took very early on from bodybuilding, hobby building, whatever you want to call it from my perspective, is that I got told that I couldn't do certain stuff in terms of progressing my body and progressing my physique, and it came from a very negative space. And it was like, well, watch me, I'm going to do it. And it might have taken, 100,000 repetitions to do it, but it progressed, and it's progressed to a point that I couldn't even imagine it to in that. And the mind is very much the same, but you can't see it. You can't look in the mirror and go, oh, my brain looks like it's functioning well better today. Like, that's amazing. And well better is definitely not a good use of English, but it's true. You can't see that, and you can't really measure it apart from in terms of if you look at the grand scheme of things, if you're trying to improve something. So if I look at the anxiety side of stuff, how many times do I check my pulse? I don't know, maybe twice a week. Like, maybe, if that. How many times do I have things that spark stuff off? I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 a week, something like that. That could be 10 to 15 things a day. Okay, that's cool. Like, how quickly can I catch myself slipping? Pretty quick now. Like, I can catch myself pretty quickly. Does it spiral? Yeah, it does. But can I bring myself back from that? Can we bring me back from that faster? Yeah. Do I put myself in those positions and situations as much as I did before? No. Do I want to test myself? And before, the answer would be no, because I didn't. Like, I wanted to just evacuate from those thoughts and feelings. And it's now like testing my body to see what it's capable of, and testing my mind in that pressure cooker environment of being like, okay, well, my body's a bit fucked now because of dieting. My mind could potentially be a bit weaker, but I found its resolve to be stronger because most of the time when my back's up against the wall, like I'll triple down on just being quite stubborn. And that's where the stubbornness just came in terms of the pollution was like I was just so stubborn in wanting to know and understand it that I just almost let go of everything else, which was at a negative repercussion to other aspects of my life. But at the time, I couldn't see it. And if we're talking about um, people around people who've got anxiety and people who are trying to help people with anxiety, I guess imagine, like that visual representation of looking down a tunnel and you can just see that light speck. If you imagine that that's what the person with anxiety is thinking and looking at, they just see that speck at the end. And that speck to them is like the biggest, brightest thing. And if you imagine that that's all that person can see, and you're there, their dog's there, their family's there, everything else is around, and you can see it all, but the person with anxiety just sees black and just sees that light at the end. That light at the end is whatever it is that they're focused on in that time. Because whatever I was focused on in that time, it would be my heart rate, it'd be my blood pressure, it'd be the fact that I'm going to die, it'd be that I'm having a stroke, that I'm going to have a heart attack, that I'm going to, whatever these things are, and that's all I would see, and I wouldn't see anything else. And it doesn't happen like that straight away. It happens over time. It's like someone turns the grayscale down and everyone starts to fade into black until you can't see that. And it's only when you start to just reverse that and start to turn that tide the other way that you start to be able to open your spectrum out of seeing other people and seeing how it impacts them. And I saw that it impacted you, but it was like, I don't know how to switch this off. I don't know how to stop that. I don't know how do I not care that my heart rate is 155? How do I not care that this is happening? And my fear was like, if I die and I'm not here, then how are you going to be? And like what's going to go on there? And I need to be okay to be able to facilitate this, that, and the other. And it's like all of those things, but it's just predicated about you being okay when it comes to the health side of stuff. But it just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled and spiraled. And now being on the other side of it for the most part and like doing this, I we've spoken about doing this before, and it's like,
It was
was it the
scheduled for
right
January,
time?
wasn't it?
Yeah, which wouldn't be the right time, and there's a reason that that didn't happen at that point. And doing it now feels very different to ever thinking about doing it before. Now it's like a weight is lifted, and it's been interesting talking about it because it feels like a different person that experienced all of those things. Whilst it's still me that has those memories, there's no point. Hey, there might be a ramification off the back of when we actually close this down, but I actually don't think that there will be.
Me sitting here shitting myself.
Yeah.
How's this evening gonna be, guys?
Um, well, I've heard that there's an ice cream man coming down here and we're both dieting, so sad is how it'll be. So I don't feel like it has any negative repercussions off the back of how I feel about it, which is refreshing. And talking about it is uncomfortable because the version of me now feels like I could change it. The version of me now feels like I could be different and I could help that version of me previously. But I also feel the despair and the upset and the anguish and the pain of all of those feelings that I felt. I can feel them now. I can feel how lost and sad and desperate I was to feel better because that pain that I had and my life at that point and our life at that point and watching you have surgery and knowing that I had to upheave all of that stuff was like the greatest struggle and the greatest pain. And I spoke about it on my story like quite a while ago now. Is like the thing that it's given me is like so much more mental resilience and toughness. And if I was to advise myself where to spend my time now and where I will spend my time more now, is like working on my mind over my body. My body's easy to work on for a relative degree now because I've done it for so long and I understand it so well. But the mental side of stuff and how I feed my mind, and certainly talking about it to the level that we have now, is that I will spend so much more time being kind to myself, so much more time talking to myself in a more beneficial way and willing to understand the inputs that I'm putting into my mind, because that is an epiphany that I've probably had on this in itself. Is what I feed my mind is my choice, and it's also what I feed my mind is my outcome. And if I change that, then this wouldn't be a conversation that we'd be having now, potentially, or it would be a very different conversation off the back of that. So to the listeners and people listening, you know what you feed your body in terms of your macros and your micros. You know what you feed your body if your feeder sets. You know what you feed your body if you're assisted. Vitamin T. And you might not recognize what you feed your mind.
Rob said it, didn't he? Mental vitamins.
Oh, yeah, mental vitamins. I like that. But you don't focus on it because you do that way more than you have your meals. You could eat 10 meals a day and you'll have more than 10 thoughts a day. You'll have wild thoughts about crazy things that you never even thought. You'll have conversations with people and you'll take elements of those conversations. And it's one of the things that you always take very seriously with the podcast is when you do have people's attention, and this is why I say it in the sense of if you're listening to someone, don't just jump in with words. We always reference Jordan Peterson, right? In terms of like if someone says something, pause. There's a reason that we have two ears and one mouth, right? It's the fact that if we listened more, we paused more, we listened. And I will say this to clients at times in the sense of, I don't have anything that I can solve with this particular issue. Like if it's something that's outside of like nutrition or training or that, and it's like, I haven't got anything. I might be able to say some bits, but I haven't got anything that I can say that will make this better. But you can talk, I can listen. You might come to your own thoughts and conclusions off the back of that. Or it might just help just for someone to listen. And for someone who's going through anxiety, sometimes they just want to talk about whatever it is, or they want to talk about something completely different. Or they might not want to talk at all. They might just want to be present. And again, with my thing of just focusing on something else, is like might not necessarily be the TV, might just be like going out for a walk or
What else
sitting
do
in
you
the room.
like? What's your anchor point
My anchor point.
when anxiety's bad?
What you? You're my anchor point.
What did you say?
Hmm?
You just want to cuddle.
Yeah. That is like when it was really bad, just being close to you is like I can just feel relaxed.
Safe space, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just that closeness is like that is it makes a difference. And that's something that just changes. Like so and I don't need you to say anything.
No, I know, and that's what
And
I don't.
that's no, I know you do, but like that's what I'm saying to people is like sometimes you just don't. I don't need Sarah to solve it. I don't need her to say anything. Sometimes we will talk about stuff, but other times it's just like I just need that moment of stillness, that moment of just being there and then. And that's it. And I believe that if you have someone or you are someone with anxiety, then it's finding those things. So like for me, finding those three things, finding those 3 points, reading, talking about it in my own way with what's comfortable, desensitizing myself to it to a certain point and not feeding it. And that's the big thing, really, is like the reduction of feeding whatever it is that was giving me those feelings. And that has to be on your terms. Like, has to be on your terms to a certain degree. You have to be willing to go and do that. And that's the hard shit, right? Like, there's certain times where I don't feel good, or don't feel like I feel pretty bad and pretty fucked. And I want to go and check stuff. And I'll fight that, I'll resist that urge to go and do it. And I'll be like, "Oh, fuck you." I'm talking to myself.
We also said, and you made a promise that you would tell me
Mm.
if you had an urge. Again, it's like what we said with it being like an addiction, that the self-awareness required is to, and this translates to all areas of mental health, being accountable to someone can help when it's appropriate. So, and it's something I work on with clients, and so do you. You know, if there's the potential to eat off plan or do any of the realm of things that happen in the bodybuilding space that, quite frankly, people won't talk about or they'll ignore, and I won't as a coach, and nor will you. But it's about, I need you to talk to me if these thoughts happen. I need you to talk to me if a trigger happens. I need you to talk to me if you feel you're gonna feed, is the right word. Feed the neural pathways of what this habit, addiction, whatever we want to call it, when you're about to take that action, when it's appropriate, right? I'm not saying someone that's just realised there's some level of issue and I'm going, well, you got to phone me. That's not how I'm framing it at all. Hence why we build such close relationships with our clients. But it's transferable to what I said to you. We're now at a point where I need you to promise me if you get the urge, and that's what it is, it's an urge. It's feeding. Feeding is a really good way to frame it. I need you to promise me you're going to tell me. Because we were at a point of that grieving process, that healing process, whatever we want to call it, where it was okay. Now, when we have these conversations, just for context, guys, like now we're at that point where it's that sometimes we don't talk when you're having a. I'll say, is there anything you want me to do? Do you want to talk about anything? They're the words that come out of my mouth. I don't start going, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes it's a case of like the other night where I know intuitively now I can say to you, this is the first time we've got to a point where you've done all your stuff. We've got nothing on for the evening now. We can sit with it. Let's lay down. And that intuition builds with the self-awareness between the two of you, the acknowledgement from the two of you, and coming up with a plan. It's almost like an exit strategy of being able to deal with the anxiety rather than think it's gone now, it's all fine, that's done. Because it's not the case with any of these things that can happen in the bodybuilding space or outside of the bodybuilding space. And I think that's important as well, to be able to, you know, have plans in place, be accountable, but it's so individual, and we can't, you know, we can't cover how this would be for everyone in the realms of whatever it is you might be up against. However, there are actionable steps, and that can be, and as Matt has outlined, it could be 8 months till you can let someone in to actually help you. But when it's the right time, somebody, if you're able to let them in, if they can support you unconditionally, may I add, and be self-aware enough to actually help you, accountability can help. Because you wouldn't think that, would you? You wouldn't think, oh, someone's got anxiety, they need someone to be accountable to.
Yeah.
You know, and we've stumbled across that just talking now, right? It's like, without realizing we've done that, basically, haven't we? And also, and just to add, you know, when, like you said about testing yourself, how far along are you? One thing is reflecting on how far you've come, like Matt's done on this episode, but I will remind you how far you've come because it's important. But also not expecting that you're not going to have an anxiety level to a level you had a year ago, or not expecting you're never going to have a it's the expectations that can also make the episodes worse. Because I've noticed this with you. You say, oh, it's happened really quickly. My anxiety is really high, but I've been good all day. And I say to you, we're here now. This is what we're dealing with now. Let's sit down. And because you want, sometimes I guess what I'm saying is, and your analytical mind will relate to this, you want to be further along than you are in that present moment, but you're so much further along than you were. And that's, like you say, it's invisible, isn't it? It's not quantifiable unless you're able to reflect on how far you've come. Because in that moment, you're like, but I didn't want anxiety today.
Yeah.
You often
But
got to say that, don't you?
in this moment now, though, I don't have anxiety.
No, but as in,
No, but that's what I'm saying. Is
yeah,
like I don't have it, so therefore
you're
I don't
far.
fucking want it back. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to. What pisses me off more is having a great day and then just being filled with something from nowhere. Because then it's like, and that's what And for me, because I have that mind where it's like, if you're to be like, oh, at 3 o'clock today, you'll have anxiety appointment. It's like, okay, cool, awesome. I know from like 3 till like 3:45, or like someone comes up and like
Or maybe till
grapples
6:45.
grapples me as an anxiety monster. It's like, okay, cool, like sound, let's throw down. Let's have this wrestling match. I'm
You
down
can
for
see
that.
he's got quite an extreme adventurous mind, guys.
Yeah, then it's like
Suddenly we've got an anxiety monster on the
yeah,
podcast.
and I'm grappling with them
Where's
for
the
like 45 minutes.
when
That
little
sound
teddy head?
not Teddy, like a proper monster, like let's go. Um, then that's okay because it's something that's physical as opposed to you're fine, you've had a great day, and then all of a sudden, fucked. And then it's like, ah shit, that fucking thing again. And then it's like, and then you have to bring it back down and again choose to not feed it and do all stuff. And then it's like, I haven't done any of that stuff. So it's like, why does it keep coming back? And then it's understanding that. But then getting the context of being like, well, actually, in the grand scheme of things, it's fucking vastly different from where it was, then that's fine. But something fucking with my schedule is like,
But also, it's remembering, yes, that is, if it's in the morning and you've got a full day of check-ins,
fucking
it's not
annoying.
ideal. But it's also trying to not allow, and that's what we've, I think, been working on more so recently with, doesn't mean it's ruined the whole day. It doesn't mean you're a fucking shithead. Doesn't mean that everything's going to need to be negative for the rest of the day, the week, the year. Let's bring it back to the present moment. Let's
Mm,
sit down for a minute. I'll put the kettle on. It seems, but it might seem a bit like, oh, that's really simple. But what we've realized recently, if we do that, your quotation of 45 minutes, even a month ago, it would be more like 3, 4 hours
mm.
to bring you back round. Now, the turnaround could be 45 minutes.
Oh yeah,
So again, a reflection, that's in a month, right?
yeah, yeah.
Now it's a couple of times a week. Before, nearly every day.
Mm,
So it's learning the process, and this is where I say the stages of grief, the time, the reflections. It is quantifiable, but you've got to quantify it.
mm.
Not during an episode, probably not the best time, but
No, probably not.
actually being able to do that is important. And and this is the thing, I've had this before on podcasts where I can stumble a bit with the being kind to yourself, because a completely different side of the coin. But if someone said to me to be kind to myself when I'm knee deep in a prep and I'm fucking fucked, I'd be like, fuck off, bro. What the fuck's that? I'm not a pussy, I'm not weak. So there needs to be a point where being kind to yourself, frame it in the way that's appropriate to you. Because you can imagine there might be people listening, you say self love and they go, fuck that. Everyone has these, when you say terminologies, it can be like, what? Or
Mm.
self soothing, nah, I don't need that. Da, 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 da. However you want to frame this part, guys, do so. But look at things that essentially allow you to be present and give back to you. So the hot bath, the reading of the book. We love a puzzle. Go for the walk, like you said. I like doing food prep. You not so much.
Nope.
But there's little things like that in everyday life that even relate to the bodybuilding side of things that you can do that help keep your CNS more recovered. Consequently, we've seen if you tank your CNS, you're more likely to have an anxiety episode if it's not from a trigger, because your CNS is tanked,
Mm.
and then you're more sensitive. And there's all of these things. And what I wanted to sort of touch on there was you can start to, on reflections, track and trend. You can start to collate when these things happen, and you can, like physique development, be your own experiment, be your own masterpiece. It's not about fixing, it doesn't mean you're broken. It's about acceptance, acknowledgement, and putting things in place that respect, like I said at the start, respect yourself,
Mm.
respect the traumatic event you've been through, respect that you might need some time, and then try and cultivate that into, at times, what are the steps forward. I wouldn't say zone too much in on like in 10 years time I want to be, because that's probably not,
Definitely don't do that.
no. But you know the example there we've just given of in a month's time you've gone from near on every day or every other day to once or twice in a week for 45 minutes from it being 3, 4 hours. It's a huge disparity there. And
Mm.
that can happen if we didn't do this podcast today without even knowing.
Yeah.
So that's important as well. So being able to maybe you write in a journal if you've noticed a trigger, you've come out of an episode, this is what happened. And then you write these, you don't even need to look back on them each time you have, you know what I mean? You could look back after a month, you could look back, you could talk to someone about it. There's different things you can do. Now, with people listening, and if people do relate to the pollution, the health, anxiety, etc.,
Mm.
and this isn't, to put you under pressure. Normally, the guest is on the other side of the camera, and I can say, like again, this is a live question that I didn't know how it would, end the episode. But if someone was going through similar things,
Mm.
question to you, how would you feel about people reaching out?
I feel like I am someone who can give advice, information, listen. I feel like the whole experience of anxiety, health anxiety, feeling my health deteriorate, which it did, like from a physical nature, and being understanding or just listening is like if people are going through it, and I think back to from my analytical mind, information mind, and one of the things that I struggled with is finding a reputable source of information that would be able to give me some form of answer.
Yeah, because when Sam came along, it was like Sam was the king of the world. I was like, bloody hell, he's listening to someone
Yeah,
because he's got the qualifications, like you say, he's got the experience, and he told you steps to.
yeah, and that for me is something that again, like I do have some clients who have anxiety, and these are people I've worked with for years. But now it's a whole new level of conversation and a whole new level of understanding, and something that I would say that I'm oddly grateful for in the sense of being on the other side of it because of, and this was the whole point of the whole thing, right? Is like it's some form of test that you end up getting through and coming out the other side with more experience. And people want to reach out, people want to speak about it. Like I'm more than down to talk about it because having someone even to just soundboard off to, someone who's gone through it, and someone who is relatively speaking on the other side of it from a confidence of saying that standpoint is a yeah, because if I'd had me to talk to, as I said before, I'd be like, that makes it more comforting. And to have the experience of a mind that's unraveled, and that's the best way to describe it, and then re-raveled it back up in a more ordered fashion this time, is I think what people can also take away from this is the mind and the body is often a physical manifestation of the things that you're thinking and things that you're feeding it. And to think about that, even to just think about that before you even think about speak it, like just go through it in your mind and be like, does that make sense? Does that resonate? Or the things that I'm feeding myself within that? I feel like that's something that we've touched on in this that is a big, powerful thing to kind of focus on. Yeah.
I said to you that I wanted to grow some arms because you kept calling me pencil arms. Oh, look, just as if you're watching the YouTube, here we go.
I
So
know, yeah.
that was because I said I want to grow some arms.
Yeah.
The manifestation of the physique. And an extension of this is, of course, if there's parts I've played in this episode that again you could resonate with me more so, then again, guys, my thought process. I'm always here.
She is always there, literally, always.
And I'd like to think that you guys that do reach out and the ones that I speak to know that, because I'd always show up, and that's important to me as well. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this episode to a certain degree, and getting to know us a bit more. Of course, getting to know Matt a bit more as being my other half.
Hi.
And that's what you said at the start. And if if you do know someone, or you want to share it on your story because it's helpful, or any of those things, it's always something I'm grateful for, because for me, the passion project of the podcast is something that, unless we share it and get it out there, I only have 24 hours in a day and I have to sleep in some of those. So your support really does help to continue gaining me and others being in the ears of people across the globe. So thank you for listening, guys. And of course, I will see if you're on YouTube, or you will hear me next time.
Thank you.
Hey!